Welcome to the Sedona Soul Sisters show, down-to-earth discussions on spirituality, metaphysics, paranormal, and healing topics. The Sedona Soul Sisters are Sedona's most trusted psychic mediums. We are Rosalind Reynolds, myself, Ivory
Hello.
Lanoux, Terri-ann Russell, and Melissa Brace. We have offices in Sedona, Arizona, where we see clients from all over the world. Today's topic is near-death experiences. We were just chit-chatting a little bit before we started the show and like, have you had a near-death experience? No, have you? So let's start with what is a near-death experience. It's kind of funny. I was watching a TV show the other night and somebody was talking about a near-death experience. And then what they really meant was that they were unconscious for a while. They were not pronounced dead. They were not anything like that. They just were unconscious. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what that really means. Any thoughts on that?
It's kind of a nebulous area in a way, you know, because a lot of people that I have read and talked to, their experience did not include actually, a doctor saying, okay, they've passed, they're dead. But they definitely were in a crisis situation and they were not responsive, to anyone trying to revive them or work with them or anything.
Well, that is a near-death experience, as I understand it, whether a doctor says you almost died or you died for a period of time. But the people who just are like, have a blow to the head, they're unconscious, and then they wake up, but they didn't stop breathing or anything like that. Well, that's, an experience, but I don't think that falls under near death. So near death is supposed to be where you actually die. It can be for seconds, for minutes, but you die and you come back. So I don't know, though. What are your interpretations of that, ladies?
Well, for me, it also included a premonition. I had a premonition 2 weeks before I actually had the incident happen. And I had told my husband at the time, and Roz knows this story, but I was really sick with an upper respiratory infection. And 2 weeks before, I said to him, I think I'm going to go into cardiac arrest. And he sort of just laughed it off and shrugged it off that I was being overly dramatic because I was sick. And 2 weeks later to the day, he had given me a little baby dose of Sophia's albuterol, and I couldn't breathe, and I have a heart murmur. So I don't know if it was exacerbated because I have the heart murmur, but I ended up going into cardiac arrest. He called 911. And my premonition was a little bit different than my near-death experience. So in my premonition, I was able to view it, but in my near-death experience, I was above viewing it. I had left my body and I was above watching, and I could describe everything that the paramedics did to me, everything my husband was saying. My daughter was there screaming. So I was able to view all this and I was able to describe it afterwards. But so I don't know if everybody has that sort of premonition type that I had, but that was my near-death experience. And all I heard was go back. Like, I wasn't given a choice. It felt like it was very quick. The last thing I remember was falling on the bed, and the next thing I remember was waking up in the ambulance. So I don't really know time wise how long of a length of physical time that it was.
Did you actually go to the other side?
I think I was on my way. I was up above my body and I could see myself floating further and further away. So that was much different from the premonition to the near-death experience as well. I was floating further. I didn't make it all the way. So I was in that in-between area, I would say.
I want to come back later to something that kind of pertains to the near-death experience, but I think that, Roz, you were saying that you had a near-death experience too.
Well, I was diagnosed after they tried numerous times to diagnose or figure out what was wrong with me. The doctors finally just kind of threw up their hands and they said, we don't know what she has. So, be prepared, because we don't know how this is going to continue. And I was 10 at the time, and I had been at home in bed, bedridden for 2 months, when they finally just kind of threw up their hands, and this was a long time ago, so they didn't have a lot of technical, um, the kind of technical information they have now. They just could tell that my liver was failing, and my kidneys were not working right, and etc. So I I just remember when I was sick like that, I was sleeping a lot, obviously, and I can remember, going to sleep and going out of my body, but I've been doing that ever since I was a kid, so I didn't think that was any big deal. The doctors apparently, something was going on with my breathing and with all this other stuff. And I was at home. They would not hospitalize me because they thought I had something contagious.
Hmm.
And so in the end, what they decided, their diagnosis was that I had, no one had ever heard of this hardly back then, mononucleosis, the virus of that, and it was causing all these side effects. So um, myself, I was 10. I never thought I knew I was really, really sick. My white blood count was just staggering, it was so far off. So they thought I had leukemia, or they tested for all kinds of different things. And one night I went to sleep, and I had a visitation by three, as I called them, space guys, three aliens that came, and they never said anything, and they just stood there, and they just smiled, and I was like, "What do you want?" And then they left, and then I got well, and no one could figure out why.
3 alien guys.
So the doctors were just amazed. I wasn't telling them that 3 space guys came in, but I certainly shared that with my mother, and my mother was like, well, we don't care why. You're getting well. We're happy. So I think, to me, that was the closest, if not a true near-death experience, because when you are in that situation where doctors are just throwing up their hands, they don't know what to do. It's kind of up to the powers that be, our guides, our whatever. In that case, I guess that's what would be called my galactic family. Um, and then I've had a lot of other people, I've told people that story. And it's interesting because people say, "Oh, well, I had this happen, and I saw my angel come in," or whoever. So I think there's various versions of how this works. But I feel like, in Terri-ann's case, like where she's definitely leaving her body, and then they go, "Oh no, go back. You're not done."
They give you the
That's,
boot.
yeah, that's, definitely you were headed to, a different dimensional field, and you were refused, refused and not allowed. You weren't done
Not
here.
your time. Yeah, not your
Yeah,
time.
you still have stuff to do.
Melissa, have you had a near-death experience?
I can think of 3.
I was going to
Really?
say, with everything you've gone through, I would be surprised if you hadn't.
Yeah, I think it was, I was a few times just really on the edge of that. I can think of 3, and the first 2, it's kind of severe. Some of the circumstances were kind of severe. So the first one, I had been through so much, and I tried to kill myself. And I think it was 20 years old or 21. I had been just, through abomination already. And so I thought, oh, I can't take this anymore. And um, I took enough pills to kill half a city. and when I sank into that, I had guardian angels come in, and I couldn't see anything, but they were kind of laughing at me, going, "Hey, that was really close." And I was feeling myself slide out. And they said, "Hey, that's really close. If you keep trying this, that will work. But you're not supposed to leave. Calm down." And I woke up. I didn't see anything, but I felt safe finally for a moment there. And again, kind of sassy guardian angels, like, "Hey." And so I promised I would never do that again, and I haven't. I literally, I was 21, right around the age 21 or 22, 20, I can't remember. But they wouldn't let me pass. It was like a barrier that they wouldn't let me pass. And they swept me back in. And the second one was similar to that, where I did not try to kill myself. It was just um, um, someone um, invited me to a barbecue with all my friends, and then they gave me the drug, the date rape drug. And this similar experience, like, "Hey, hold on, don't go anywhere. Hey, hey, hey." When I went into that state of being, and it was like I hit a door. And when I came out of it, when I was revived, the person that was there said, you were purple, you were blue, you were dead." And he was dragging me through the house. And so it was the same thing, like, "Oh, hey, 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 we're not letting you into this next level." But the most vivid one was the third one, where they sent me home from a very severe surgery that I had. This was probably 15 years ago. And like Roz, and like Terri-ann a little bit, I was slumped over, like people left me in my bed. I should have been at the hospital, but it was not a good experience, a bad surgery experience. Like, it wasn't good. So I'm slumped over in my bed. I lived by myself. I couldn't move, and I felt myself slipping out again. And that time I was outside of my body watching. And also my celestial beings, my cosmic family, my galactic family came, and I experienced them, and they held me up, and they were showing me what was happening to my body as it was trying to release, like I was peeing and all these things, and I couldn't move. I was outside, I wasn't in there. And but they lifted my body, and they also did something to me. They said, "You're going to feel warm and safe." And they held me, and there were 3 of them, and they were not very tall. I was like, "Hey, why do you look like that?" And they said, here's what they said. Well, right in the middle, like, "Why do you look like that?" And they said, "Why do you look like you?" And they were just giggling with me, and they put me back together. I went back inside of my body, and all 3 times my consciousness, or my awareness, or my awakening process was changed. And even though those are very severe, kind of gross stories, um, the near death part really helped me learn and grow and see from a bigger picture, and help prepare me for my life path, my work. But the third one, I've only told like 2 people, because how do you say, I think I was dead yesterday, and some um lovely galactic angelic beings came, and they shoved me back in. And it's almost like the experience I had was that they were, I was outside of my body, ready to go out of here. Yay, awesome. And they were like, "Oh no, you have stuff to do." And it's almost like they not stitched me in a creepy way, like with a needle, but they stitched me back in and put me into alignment. And they did describe a little bit what they were doing, but mostly they were trying to help me bubble up that life essence again, and warm me back up, because I apparently had been my body got really cold. I was I was not going to make it through that day. So
Pretty
big,
powerful.
kind of creepy experiences, but yeah, and it changed me and helped me connect with God in different ways.
I've only had one, and like Raz, I was 10 years old. That was a year I had 2 surgeries, and the first one, it was the simple one. I went in to have tonsils and adenoids removed, and I had my surgery, and I was in a room with another girl, and I was unconscious. And then all of a sudden, I was out of my body, and I was floating up near the ceiling. Looking down, I saw myself laying in the bed sleeping. I saw my roommate. Her name was Barbara, and I'll tell you why I remember that. And she was sleeping across the room, and there were nurses standing around her taking care of her, and the nurses were talking, and one of them was talking about her boyfriend, because both of us were still unconscious. And when I woke up, I came back into my body, and I asked her about her boyfriend, and I heard them start like, how did she know about that? How did she hear that? She was unconscious. She was still under sedation, and I don't know what happened, but there was, when I woke up, so sorry, a little annoying cough. When I woke up, there were a bunch of nurses standing around me doing things. And I never got no one ever said anything about like something bad happening or anything like that. But I always wondered, like, why did I leave my body at that time? And the only thing that I can remember, like, I didn't go as far as like crossing to the other side, but behind me, like all of a sudden I felt like I was rising higher than the ceiling of that room. Apologies. And behind me was this light, very bright light shining down, and frequency that I recognized of angels, but I didn't see them. I didn't turn around and look at them. I just felt it behind me. And then I was back in my body. So I always wondered if something happened they just didn't want to tell my parents about, or my parents didn't want to tell me that something happened after my surgery, and maybe I did, die briefly. I don't know. No one ever said anything. So, but that's why I remember, because the nurses were talking about my roommate, Barbara. So I still remember that whole conversation, and I'm talking about her boyfriend. But Melissa, you hit on exactly, like, to me, what the meat of the matter is with this topic is what happens to people after they have a near-death experience. And like you were saying, like, it propelled you. A lot of people even gain some gifts through a near-death experience.
Yeah, I think mine were always enhanced in a lifetime of a love. I'm on an adventure here. And I think sometimes some of those pieces that are seemingly kind of extreme have helped me truly, like the words I would use would come into alignment with my true gifts, as well as my, again, connection with God and opening up to my abilities and my purpose, which have, all of us here, we are purposeful in our helping others. And so I'm very grateful for all of the experiences, even though they were kind of pretty creepy, actually. But the expansion inside, like, it's almost like God reached in and gave me expansion or knowledge or truth or understanding in a bigger way that I got to learn in the days and weeks and months and years after the near-death experience. And so I can kind of look back and see the synchronicities and go, whoa. And I guess I can see that in others' stories, near-death experiences too. But I wonder, because we're not supposed to share, that's not our, we don't really talk about those moments all that much. I wonder if that's really one of the main keys of it, like the expansion and the growth, and um, on our paths and our abilities and lives.
I always feel like there's something about, likely, that by crossing over and you're in that the afterlife, and that it allows you to reconnect with memories, experience, and knowledge, wisdom you've gained through your lifetimes, that suddenly those barriers that keep us from remembering it are removed, or some of them are removed. because you're going home. Briefly you went home. So it makes sense that you might remember things once you cross back over, even briefly.
Good way to
And
say it. Home. Going home.
yeah, you were so young too, so it really probably opened and expanded that there was so much more out there than just what you see or feel, or you know what I mean? In the 3D world, there's so much more that opened your awareness to that.
I was already well aware of that. I just didn't know what it all was, and I didn't understand why I saw these things and other people didn't. But I have had some clients that have had some pretty powerful near-death experiences, and some of them have written books about them where they cross to the other side, they talk to their angels, they see their loved ones, and they might even feel like they stayed for days, and then they're told you can't stay, and they go back and it's been like 4 minutes, but there's no time in the other side. They don't believe there's no such thing as time. So that's interesting too, that you can have quite an amazing experience and be gone so briefly in human time.
Our perceptions of time, the way we think about it, is always so finite. Like seconds, minutes, hours. In these other dimensional fields, I don't think time moves like that at all. So it's not really surprising that, you would have an experience that someone would have an experience of so many minutes, but yet in reality, that wasn't the true experience at all.
I know this is digressing slightly, but that's why I think time travel is possible, because time only exists in the human mind. We constructed it. So I'm sure that there's a way to go straight through time to wherever you want to be or need to be. But that's neither here nor there, is it?
Oh, I think it's poignant. Maybe it's one of the things that in the pieces that in the years to come for our children and grandchildren, this science and spirit we will evolve and come together. That weirdly, that's one of the things. And I don't talk about this kind of thing very much at all, because people will kind of scrunch their nose at you, and our jobs anyway, sometimes, on occasion, not always, certainly. But it's the little bit of that fear around. But I also learned that, and it was a teaching in that time period after my experience, the first one, when I was a very young lady. They taught me how we travel and go time loops, time, and it's possible, the possibilities and things like that. I just wonder if maybe later we'll go, oh, we were learning how the true science and spirit, like through the heaven and earth, comes together. Perhaps. I think
I
it's
don't know. There just seems to be so many amazing things people gain out of that experience, though, other than a sure knowledge that there is an afterlife. That's a big one. Whereas before they may have been agnostic, atheist, or they just didn't really know what they believed. Then they have a near-death experience and they no longer are afraid of death. They are absolutely sure of where they're going, what's going to happen, how beautiful it is. And another one is that people do suddenly have gifts. Like, I know people who never had mediumship ability till they had a very powerful near-death experience, and then they were a very powerful medium. And I find that interesting.
Makes perfect sense, though, because it's got to alter your frequency, and to allow your mind and your spirit to embrace, and get outside these finite little ideas of time. And of course, I mean, being here where the sun, it's the sun that rules a lot of the concept of time. And yet, these other dimensional fields, they don't have the sun rising and setting every day on a perfect little section of minutes. And so I feel like, that's another one of those things that we're kind of in a box. All of our life, we're in a box with the idea of minutes and seconds and the sun and how many times it revolves, et cetera, et cetera. Everything going like clockwork. Whereas in these other, parallel universes and dimensional fields, that's not the case. So it's a big revolution in your head, kind of, to allow all that to process.
Even beyond the sense of not having time, is that you can create what you want to create in the afterlife. Like what your afterlife looks like is up to you. And I know that through doing mediumship readings, but I would have never known that if I hadn't started doing this professionally and reading for so many people and spirits showing me houses and gardens and lakes and mountains. And it's like, what is all this about? And piecing that together through what they show me and tell me to figure out that's where they live in the afterlife. So here's one thing pretty consistent is, people will see a light, and then they cross over, and then they always talk about the vivid colors. They'll talk about how vivid everything is on the other side. And this is not a near-death experience I'm going to tell you about. Let me just preface that, but I want to talk about these vivid colors. I've mentioned before that years ago, I was doing a reading for a very nice woman whose husband had just passed a couple days previous, and he couldn't come through. And what he finally did, it felt like his spirit hand took me like this and turned my head. And then all of a sudden I was looking through his eyes at the afterlife, and I'm standing in this field, and the sky was like hot pink, and the trees were purple, and the grass was bright yellow, and everything was these strange colors, but beautiful and vivid. And there was this colored fluff stuff flying through the air, and I could hear angels singing, like sounded like a million angels singing. It was just the most beautiful music, and it felt like breathing love. That's the best way I can describe it. And I thought, since then, it was like I felt like I was there for about 5 minutes, but when I listened to the recording later, it was more like maybe 30 seconds. And I'm telling this woman about this experience, and later I'm thinking, wow, if that's what people see when they have a near-death experience, no wonder if that's what they feel, see, hear. Sometimes they describe cities. Sometimes people have a near-death experience and they see cities. I didn't see any buildings or people at all, just nature, and it was really beautiful. But when people see something like that, and they bring that back to their life now, how could it not change them for the better?
Definitely presents a whole new, a whole new vision of all the different possibilities.
Kind of like when a teenager or a young person travels overseas for the first time. I think it's a lot like that, like how that broadens your view of the world, your scope of what's out there on a much bigger level. So now you know the things that are in our world. Let's show you what's in the afterlife. And it's like, whoa, wow, I would like to go there again. I wouldn't mind spending time, and we all will. We all will get there. I'm not in any rush. Let me just put that out there to my angels. Not in any rush. But I have heard a lot about the colors and how sometimes people don't want to come back. They're just either they feel so good there, they haven't felt that good their whole lives or for a long time, or their loved ones are there that they miss so terribly, haven't seen in many years, and they don't want to leave them. It's sort of like they forget temporarily while they're there. They forget about the people who are still living, and they're so joyous to be reconnected with those they haven't seen in a long time that they love. So that's interesting. I think that's something we can know, that when you cross, and I've known that from readings too, that when you cross, there's a natural emotional separation of sorts that generally happens where they're okay. It's the ones left behind who are grieving, missing really bad, It's not the same for those who have crossed over. So I think that's another thing that can be gained through those experiences. Now, let's say we are not here purporting that you go out and have yourself a near-death experience. No, you do not want to do that. That's not what this is. Melissa, have you had clients through the years that have had these kind of experiences? What do they say, just
You
generally?
know, there was one that was rather recent, actually. And it was a man, and I really like him. That worked with him a few times. And his wife had passed, and he was at a place where he was kept saying it over and over. I don't want to be here. Why did she have to go? But I'm the one that, she was taking good care of herself. She should be here with the grandchildren and things like that. And there was an accident. He was in an accident, and it broke his hip, and he was injured, head injury and everything. So he was in the hospital, and they had to do surgery. And he said, I talked to him, and I think the day after surgery, and he said, I saw them all. I wanted to stay. And they were playing baseball. It was their family they love sports and outdoors. And so he saw the wife and some his, parents and things like that. And they were playing baseball. And he said, after this experience, he came in, and although he still had loss and grief, he felt, and he even said it, that he was renewed later. And he chose some things in life to do while he was here, to help others, and follow his purpose for as long as he had left, to help humanity, help this world. And so I thought that was really poignant. I just that one was joyous, because they said he almost died, and he had been wanting to, but it wasn't his time. Just wasn't his time.
That's so interesting, that whole thing about it being your time. Makes me wonder what that is for people who don't have a specific spiritual mission. That means all of us must have some sort of mission on some level. Every single person alive, even if your mission is to learn a lesson or help other people learn their lessons.
Right? Because we came here to grow and expand, and it really is like school, through our experiences that we've set up. And so it really is for that growth and that expansion. And not everybody understands that on a big purpose level, but sometimes even just learning about love. It could be something so simple as just learning, to love, or love yourself.
That's a big one. Loving yourself.
So many lessons, so little time.
Sometimes I always say the days seem really slow, but the years go by fast. But oh my
True.
gosh. And I say that because my daughter turned 40 last month, and I thought, oh my gosh, I was just 42 7 years ago. That's what it feels like. I remember that so vividly, what I was doing, who I was with, the things I was into. Wow, that's how fast those years zipped by. So I think that we all are being woken up to how unreal what we think of reality is, how many falsehoods we've been raised with, told, thought we understood. And like Terri-ann was saying, how being alive, being human is a teaching experience. It's immersion learning. One of the big things we're learning by near-death experience, you get this fast forward, like a crash course in we're so much more than we think we are. I think that's a big part of what people gain from it. That's why they're allowed to remember the memories from their near-death experience, because it's a crash course for them. Boom, awakened. Boom, shift forward on their spiritual journey. Those are always so much fun, aren't they?
Put me in, coach, right?
I always say, I wish I had known what I know now on many things, but in this particular instance, I wish I'd known that if your spiritual awakening or journey is happening too fast, if it's like a roller coaster ride, you can't sleep, you don't know, your head's spinning, you're like, We all know this thing. I feel like I'm crazy. I might be going crazy. You can say, angels, slow down my awakening, slow down this shift. It's too much, too fast. I didn't know. I just kind of held on tight, and I hate roller coasters, by the way. So I just held on and didn't sleep much for like 4 years for back in the mid 80s. It was an adventure, all right. But I think this is part of it. And it seems like more and more people are having these. And what I'm noticing is more and more people who don't believe in God, who don't believe in an afterlife or heaven or any concept or angels, they are having, it seems like more of them are having these type of experiences. I don't think that's a mistake. I don't think it's a coincidence.
I agree. Think about this one. What about this concept? You know how we say and the expansion and awakening of the whole planet, we sometimes use the term, my loved one, my dog, my family member is crossing the Rainbow Bridge today. And so what if we looked at that as in frequencies, and that we are all connected? And when we experience, and it also goes into, I love the story where you said that the people, Ivory, the people, and you experiencing in vivid color, vivid, like we can't even describe it. And what if that is bridging, that bridge, the Rainbow Bridge is maybe bigger than we think, and coming into us in this awakening, these awakening years, decades, times, especially now, and bridging that for us and bringing us into, while in our human bodies, that higher frequency and awareness and expansion and connection with the divine. And whatever words we use, it doesn't have to be, all of our perceptions and ideas don't have to be the same. But whatever God is, love is to you, what if that's being bridged and in bigger ways than we think? And it was a term, or especially having to do if you have had a near-death experience, like it was like the bridge was connected to you. And in this awakening, it could be helpful as we rise in consciousness and our frequencies lift. What about that?
Interesting. It's a very distinct possibility. I mean, we've all talked before. We just seems to circle back to this a lot of shows, and there's a good reason for it, how we are going through this major shift as a planet, all the people on the planet right now. And think about it like on your own spiritual journey. Major shifts are usually chaotic, confusing, overwhelming, affects your sleep, can be draining on your energy level. And if you did not know what was going on, it would be disturbing to you. Might, like the whole thing of feeling like you're going crazy. I think there's millions of people on the planet right now going through that, and they have no idea why they're feeling the way they do. So I think that there's a whole lot of shifts happening right now that it's really hard to pinpoint everything happening all at once. But I keep feeling, and the angels say we are shifting forward. I was talking to them last night, and they're adamant that we are moving into a place where we live more in harmony with one another and with planet Earth, that we will turn around global warming. I'm like, yes, so glad to hear that. And I think all of these experiences people are having are symptoms of the shift. I mean, almost dying is almost dying. And it's interesting. So, okay, there are some people who do not have wonderful experiences when they have a near-death experience. Those are less common, but I have read some books about people, and mixed in there were some who said it was a dark experience. Sometimes they were people who had done some pretty dark things. They were not on a very good path. And sometimes they weren't. Sometimes they were just a normal person. Does anybody have any thoughts on why somebody's near-death experience might be dark if they're not dark in this lifetime?
I think
So
it
that
could depend, a lot of it could depend on your underlying perceptions, which of course impact your frequency of energy and everything. But a lot of people strive to um, live a very positive, do life, do good deeds, all of those things, but they kind of do have the underlying sense of that things are not working out the way they thought, or that they're dealing with these life altering events that they have no control over. So I think a big factor of it all, there's people that work very hard. And of course, like in the 70s and 80s, everything was about having a positive attitude. You can be having a positive attitude, but you can still be having a stressful experience. And it's about your perception, and I think it's about faith too. We're all challenged. We're all brought into these situations where we have to kind of lift ourselves up and get focused on where we're going and where we need to be going and what we need to be doing in terms of doing good works. But it's still hard. And, you know, I can certainly remember times when I was, younger, where I was just um, trying to keep myself in balance, you know, and trying to keep my emotional and spiritual focus on, you know, being the person that I knew I was supposed to be, that I was on my path of purpose and all that. But you're still challenged all the time. And when you're challenged like that, you have to dig deep and have that inner faith. I don't know how you get through it all otherwise. And it's interesting. I read, and then I saw also a video on YouTube where a couple of different people went through near-death situations. One of them was an older man where he had suddenly had a heart event, was rushed to the hospital, actually experienced death, died, stopped functioning, and then returned. Same thing, he was sent back and he was talking about it. But when he crossed over, he did not experience any hesitation because he knew he was in the right place, because immediately he saw his wife, who had died 8 years earlier. And he said she was standing in a field of beautiful flowers, just reaching out to him. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people's near-death experiences are pretty scary. They're not based on that frequency and that faith and connecting. At some point, you're going through, as you mentioned, like some things that you maybe created in your energy when you were living your life. So there's so many variables.
Well, considering that our lifetimes, our various past lives and our current life are so intertwined, like each experience leading to the next, lessons building to the next, I've wondered if somebody has a really dark near-death experience, if it's more about their past lives than it is this life. So, it's interesting though, because some of the people have actually been just so mild-mannered and like they're churchgoers, and they always thought if something like that happened to them, they'd be seeing angels. And so their expectations were what most people have, and what they saw was blackness and scary things, and they felt ominous feelings. And I'm like, whoa, I definitely don't want one like that. But I don't know, has anybody read anything about that? It's been a long time since I've read about those negative experiences. You have, Melissa?
I don't think
I grew
people
up in a
talk
book.
about that. I don't think
I read-
they feel comfortable to share much. Those kind of.
There's some books that include stories about it though, because they're trying to like get a real overall like what kind of experiences. What were you going to say, Melissa?
Well, and what if it's partly like, all of us come here with purposes and we don't know what we can be, we don't know what, someone driving in the car next to us' purpose deeply is. And sometimes we don't even know our own full purpose. And if we look at the possibility that in this earth life, in our heavy bodies before we rise up and cross over, this energy atmosphere has a lot of extra heavy stuff, and over the thousands of years there's been a lot created or believed in that was dark or heavy, and what if we're clearing that consciousness in these times and rising up and clear. It's almost like vacuuming. Imagine if you never cleaned your house and you just throw your plates on the floor after you ate and some trash over your shoulder. It would be like that atmosphere for us in heavy bodies. And maybe we don't really realize that. So as we come out of our body, we go, and we're kind of stuck in those lower energies before we get to the heavy part, which could possibly be why, some of the experiences are really scary. And we go, oh, wait a minute, maybe we need to vacuum our energy spaces, our home that we can't see as we come home. We need to vacuum and scrub up. Where's the Windex? We need to scrub this up. And that might be a possibility of why, if people have really wonderful people, have good people, have really kind of scary near death experiences, or have fear through that experience. Does that make sense the way I got it?
It does. And it occurred to me too that we talked about this, how I know people don't like hearing this, but sorry, if you're a person of light, you can be very much of an attraction to the dark, and they will try to attack you if they can get to you. And anyway, what if somebody had a close, they were near to death and they didn't cross to the other side, but they went into like a void, and the dark attacked them in the void, and they didn't really go to the other side. Maybe they didn't go to the other side and have a negative experience. They had a negative experience in the void space. And I've often wondered about that, because everything that I've ever heard and seen and experienced about the other side, there's no levels that felt like that. No levels of the afterlife that felt like what these people experienced. So I think there's something else out there that can happen when you come close to dying that we haven't even identified it yet. We don't know what it is. I mean, my gosh, we don't even know. The human mind is not fully mapped yet. How in the world could we know everything about the afterlife? I mean, we're just in the last 15 years having legitimate scientists studying it, having that be their focus of study. So I think that many amazing revelations are on the verge of being announced through that very serious research being done at universities around the world, being done by renowned scientists. I think that we're going to find out a lot of things, but we'll probably never know it all. We'll never know it all. And that's okay. We don't want all our mysteries to be taken away, do we? It's kind of fun to have some things that are unknown.
Well, I think too, I think that's a really good point you're making, because look at the number of situations that we deal with where there's, and I really don't like this terminology, but it's the accepted terminology that people understand. When you're in a situation where you're trying to help someone resolve a haunting, that spirit obviously has not crossed over to the other side. That spirit has either made a choice to be in that kind of purgatory, that kind of in between kind of space of nothingness, and remain in the place where they felt comfortable in life, or some event occurred and they kind of got stuck there in time. I mean, because there are a lot of, you know, I've certainly encountered spirits who had remained in the buildings or in the areas where they had been in life. And I don't believe those spirits were sent back. I believe those spirits said, nope, I'm sticking right here and I'm going to hang around with these people over here in this building. And when you encounter that, I mean, it's definitely um, a an altered frequency that they're in. You can help them release and be released from that frequency, but basically if they wish, but you have no you as the helper. I mean, you don't have any control over where they go. So again, maybe they're selecting another alternative frequency space. So it's definitely something that's unresolved, and it's worth, it definitely bears experiencing and looking at and questioning.
That's true. So we already know about that void because there's plenty of that going on where spirits just choose to linger for one reason or another. So maybe that's the void people are traveling into when they think they're having a near-death experience and they really didn't get that far. We just don't know, but I know people are going to question that. They're going to wonder about that. So I thought we should cover it somewhat because it is one of the experiences that less people do have. For most people, it's beautiful, magical, um, an amazing sacred experience, but not for everybody. Any other thoughts you have today?
What about the part about this, like on another step to that, where that's the part where I would say that's the part we need to vacuum and clean up those layers. And also, when you're a light worker, when you're a good heart-centered human being, those energies or entities or whatever we might call them we call them the lower rungs, the lower frequencies on our, they do like to go find the light beings. They do like to, like the moths to the flame, right? And in some of the, for decades of study for me, not that I understand it all fully, but the shamanic works and the frequency work that I've done, and different views around the world from different cultures and viewpoints. What if some of those beings attached to us go to the flame, the moths to the light,
Yeah.
and we become fragmented, we get beaten up, so it's just we can't see it, but our stability, our balance gets beaten up or targeted in a way. And what if we have fragmented things? So there's, in my shamanic work, we over, not mine, but over many centuries and millennia, they call it a soul retrieval. So what if in a near-death experience, there's a piece of us that's wounded, a piece of us that's bound down in those lower energies, and that's what the people are experiencing. They're like gonna, perhaps that's a process when we cross over, that we go get our pieces that are a little bit splintered or wounded to come back home, as we are all on this journey home. And the near-death experience was kind of saying, hey, on your journey home,
Absolutely. It's a distinct possibility.
weird pieces that we just don't understand, but we're working on it. We're on the path. We're working on it.
And we're out of time today. We have talked right up to the minute here. If you have questions or comments and you're watching the show later on YouTube or another platform, you can email us your questions, send them to ivoryangelic2@gmail.com. We'll be glad to discuss them amongst us and get back to you with an answer. And you've been watching the Sedona Soul Sisters show. If you'd like more information about us or our services, visit our website, sedonasoulsisters.com. Tune in next week when our topic is twin flames and soulmates. It's our Valentine's Day show.
Don't miss
And
it.
until then, have an enlightening week.